Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. Bradley's mother, Narcissistic, passed away 4 months ago. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system, where he can't speak or understand the language and he will be taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. That's 518-474-8390 to please voice your concerns to keep Bradley here safe in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. I have a brand new guest on. I'm very honored to have Chad Farley on. He is an Air Force veteran who was injured in the line of duty protecting his country. He's a husband and father and currently spends his time advocating for child and family rights. 3 years ago, his family was forced into a system that he had no idea was even broken. And through their traumatic experience, his family and himself, they were forced to see the darkness behind the curtains of the child welfare system. And he has vowed to help fight for changes so that no other child or family has to endure this pain that they have gone on with. Thousands of other families across this country have. Also, Chad Farley and his son Aiden has they've also spoke at the General Assembly, House Bill 0552, which was actually the goal of Children's Services speaking about the best interest of the child and their mission statement and their motto. And Chad has given a good speech. However, he was only allowed 2 minutes, and so was his son, who was 12. And the thing is, they were also interrupted through their speeches as well. And I welcome you, Chad. How are you and your family throughout this process? Where are you at?
Well, Marion, first off, thank you. Your podcast gives a voice to families, like ours and others, and I'm sure this only came up through your own pain and experience. So thank you for doing what you're doing. Marianne, we're above ground, so that's one good thing.
Mhm.
Um, we are currently in court still with my daughter's case. My son Aiden is back home, doing well, and yeah, we're here.
Mhm. I bet Aiden is so glad to be home.
It's true what they say. You never get the child that left back home, and
Mhm.
that's definitely the same here. We still got parts of our child home, but the Aiden that left on April 14th is not the Aiden that came home. But he is flourishing. He's 12 years old. He's doing some really cool things. Civil Air Patrol. He's
Mhm.
flying aircrafts. The boy is thriving, but just in a different way.
Mhm. Right. I think when these tragedies happen, as you said, when he left, you're not getting the same kid back.
No, no, and I hear that from parents. I have a lot of parents contacting me when they see our TikToks or our YouTube, and I'm hearing the same thing over and over. I honestly, 3 years ago, before this incident, I would have never believed the things that happen are happening in the United States of America. Just never would have thought about it, and it's heartbreaking.
Mhm. Right. I didn't even think this stuff went on until it happens to you. A lot of people don't realize this. They may think CPS is helping children and yeah, they don't understand what a parent has to go through. A fit parent, loving fit parent has to go through to get their child back. And when you get them back, they're not the same.
Absolutely. And so I disagree with some things with some people out there that are on the same page as far as advocating. I do think there's a place for DCS in the states, because there are situations that we read about in the papers or whatnot that really need somebody to stand up for a child. I think there's a place in this country for that. It's just got to be guided the right way. It's got to have laws and everything that's and policies that are adhered to. Sorry,
It's
but
okay.
um, we fight in today's world. Integrity is huge, and I think you see part of that in my son's speech. One of my core values in the military was integrity. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm perfect, because I'm not. I'm human. But I have lived my life with as much integrity as I possibly can. But integrity is not like it was in our grandparents' era. you
Mhm.
know um in my era, it's what benefits the person. And people can think and say all the time in whatever jobs they do that their personal um their personal ideas and beliefs don't affect their jobs. But especially in the child welfare area, that happens all the time. And unfortunately, it's not proof or evidence driven. It's just what they think.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the basis of our whole entire what thrusted us inside the system.
Exactly, because even in my case, we had a caseworker without a PhD, only a child development bachelor degree, and I guess she had worked at the place 11 years at the time, but she, insinuated I was mentally ill.
But that seems to be the go-to these days. Now,
Mm.
in our case, there is, I do have a lot of PTSD and some depression things going on from, my accident in the military.
Mhm,
Um, that was before this, and then handling, this process and what it's done to our family. But that seems to be their go-to, to be able to throw any parent into a mental health evaluation, to force them to do this without grounds.
mhm,
That was one of the things done in my case that I fought vigorously to not do, because they have the burden of proof, not us.
mhm,
But
mhm,
as a parent, when you're thrusted into this situation, you don't know what to do. You just want to appease the court system. You just want your child back, and you think it's going to be easy by talking to them, which
mhm.
we did, by doing whatever they say, which we did, and all that was just turned around and used against us. And that's where most parents make the biggest mistake,
Mhm.
is unfortunately in today's world, you just can't talk to DCS, the police. You just can't do that. And I hate saying that. I really do, because I believe that we should be able to talk to these services to get to the root of the problem, instead of having it, a child removed from a family, you know, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars in a court system that's already overwhelmed. Like, it's just an ongoing issue, and it just has a waterfall effect. And yeah, you just can't talk to anybody as much as you think it's going to help. Do not talk to anybody.
Yeah, I agree with you, um, because when they came knocking on my door, I had friends that said, "Oh, let them in. There's nothing wrong with your house, just let them look through the fridge." Well, little did I know I was gonna be berated and screamed at for, I believe it was an hour and a half.
Yeah,
And
it's
and again, the lies of, a one-sided interview. This is what they're doing to families.
I couldn't agree with you more. And again, before this process, I would have been telling you, Marianne, let them in your house. Let them. You have nothing to hide. Just let them. You know, I like to say I'm upper middle class. I've done a lot, been around the world, mission trips. We've been peer mentors. We're national spokespeople for two very large non-military nonprofits. Like we were doing right.
Mhm.
Our kids were raised right. Um, I would have never had an idea that what is going on. And people don't. If they're not in the system, they don't know.
No, they don't until you get hauled into a courtroom and the burden of proof is on you, and you will have a caseworker perjuring themselves on the stand. I don't know if you had that issue as well.
You sure did. And even, I mean, not even just a caseworker, I mean, therapists, police officer, perjury, if it's not something that is good to the state's case, it just gets swept under the rug.
Mhm.
It's unreal.
Right, and, also these caseworkers are completely even out of line in a courtroom with their, gestures, uh, what they say, continuously calling a parent a perpetrator. I have it in a transcript where I think she called me a perpetrator at least over 20 times. She wouldn't even call me by my name.
That it's just it's so unfortunate, and that leads into, kind of why does
Mhm,
family court do all this stuff? And before I met the great Connie Regule,
mhm.
I had no idea, but I've learned because Connie digs into this stuff here in our state, and she really goes after what's behind those dark curtains, and she has opened my eyes to, things like our caseworkers get bonuses.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
these are things that as an American you would be like, there's no way. There is no way they do that type of stuff. I'm here to tell you they do.
Mhm.
There is just so many things that happen that you are not aware of. And I think it's just like in society today where you're seeing all this First Amendment stuff, know your rights.
Mhm.
For the lay person, Marianne, you don't have time to know your rights. You think
Right.
they can't do this to me. I'm not doing X, X, and that. They can. If they want to, they can.
Mhm.
And I'm here to tell you, I know this for a fact.
Did you think that someone called in an indication just to get even with you for something? Mhm.
Wow. I appreciate that question. For us, this started way back in the I guess 2008-ish. Um, I had married my wife, who I've been married with almost 15 years now,
Mhm.
and she had just gotten divorced, and they had a beautiful 2-year-old child that I'm just going to leave out of it for at the moment. But it was a divorce that just wasn't going well. Parenting, co-parenting was going okay. Um, and then the father got remarried, and that's when our child started coming home after visits, just saying all kinds of things. And these things led us getting our daughter into counseling at the recommendation of her pediatrician. And our child continued therapy for almost 2 years, really trying to get dad kind of active in that. And that wasn't happening. It was kind of going downhill. Um, just a lot of jealousy on behalf of the stepmother.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, even calling my wife names in public. You know, the father was on the belief style of, if it was his time, even if it was, say, a concert at school, my wife can't go up and say, "Hey, you did a beautiful job. You look so pretty. It
Mhm.
was his time. She wasn't allowed to talk to him. That's the type of parenting that this stepmother brought to the father, in my personal opinion.
Mhm.
Um, couldn't get dad involved in doing all of the therapy, couldn't get him to come. I think the first time he did come, our daughter by that time had been in therapy for a while and had been given a voice. And so she kind of let loose on dad. And he didn't want to come back. I mean, we've got emails. I mean, he said he would no longer pay,
Mm.
for her therapy. It was her quote bitch sessions.
Mhm.
Um, it just wasn't supported. And so that led to our daughter getting a safety plan put in place by her therapist at the time. And this safety plan pretty much said until dad, I'm just going to summarize, till dad that she wasn't to go over there. And so this went on, and then dad held mom in contempt of court for this. All he had to do was come to therapy. Like
Mhm.
that was the only thing. Work it out with your daughter. This isn't between the four parenting people.
Mhm.
This is between you and your daughter. And he just, for some reason, to this day, I still don't understand. He wouldn't do that. And so again, he held mom into contempt because she wasn't sending the child over there because of the safety plan.
Mhm.
And a circuit court judge, not a family court judge, the child support judge, didn't even take this safety plan into consideration, didn't even say anything. Instead, told my wife that pretty much your child's going to have to learn to be bullied. It might as well be from her father. This is this is real.
Ah.
And so he forced our daughter to go back over to her father's. Um, this was something we didn't anticipate. We were just hoping to get it fixed between the two of them through therapy.
Mhm.
And so our daughter gets forced back over there. Um, and pretty much one of her first visits fell on her month in the summertime. And so we didn't really have a lot of say in that. I mean, the judge told my wife to every day, I think it was something like every day that our child missed, it was 10 days in jail to bring your toothbrush. Um, these are
Ah.
these are real things. And so our daughter was over there, constantly texting, my wife saying, please help me,
Mm.
I I'm fighting, we can't figure things out, I'm being yelled at. Just a bunch of things that therapy could have fixed between my daughter and her father's household. And there was nothing we could do. And so, we even tried offering to bring lunch over, and I'm on dad's time. He has cameras. I'm not allowed, just,
Oh.
just really things you don't want your child to have to go through all out of hate and jealousy.
Mhm.
But that's what she was stuck in the middle of. And so unfortunately, she was doing some things that teenagers do. And it sounds like dad found out about that. And I guess walked in on her having a conversation that she probably shouldn't have been having at the age she's at.
Mhm.
And this led to dad taking her phone. I'm going to kind of skip through some of the stuff because we are still in litigation. But I can support anything I tell you with
Mhm.
with hard facts. Um, the next day, after my child got caught on the phone, um, we had DCS allegations, and so um, we now know dad went through the phone and got some items that our child shouldn't have had on her phone, conversations that we agree with dad. Had we known, we're not going to let our child do that.
Mhm.
But that part of it led to us getting all the information off of our child's iPad. And that iPad was still connected to the phone.
Mm.
And so all the Snapchats, all the the dark life that our child had that we had no idea about came out. And instead of dad reaching out and saying, do you know, what's
You're
going on
right.
here? Have you seen this? No, he went straight to DCS, because it's always been against, us. It's been, his family against our family instead of trying to work for the child's benefit.
Mhm,
And so that led into DCS first coming into our lives. Now, DCS did not investigate any part of that on our end, never talked to us about it, never reached out and said, what do you have to say about this?
mm,
Immediately did a petition to take our daughter out of our home. And, throughout our daughter's notes in therapy, constantly says she just says what's needed to say in a situation to make people happy.
mhm,
And just constantly. So when she, was, caught in the act of doing something wrong, children are going to try to deflect.
mhm,
And, with the reported history of how dad, reacts when he's angry, which our child has documented a lot of different ways, I'm sure she was scared out of her wits. And, unfortunately, that just that led to DCS, and it's a terrible thing.
oh, I agree. It's how it snowballs is beyond me.
Yeah.
There's no common sense to it at all.
But it's, unfortunately also it's words. People don't understand how powerful words are, and especially words to a DCS person who has the power of a pen
Mhm,
to change an entire life. So, like I said, our child was taken out of our home. Our youngest, our 12-year-old, was left in the home. Okay, so we were such a dangerous place. Took the child and left our youngest here.
mhm,
And we didn't fight at the time really hard, just because we were saying, if our daughter is saying this stuff, well, then she needs to be over at her father's. Our daughter has been told from day one, if you want to live with your father, if you want to, go see your father, in the middle of the week, we don't care. We never have. Our
mhm,
kids, both our kids, or all three of our kids, had their own phones.
mhm,
And before cell phones were feasible, they had landlines with their own phone numbers.
mhm,
They could pick up the phone or a phone call in at any time, before bedtime. Like, people just, they don't understand what you're doing to a child if you do that. And I'm a product of that. And that's why I vowed from my first child not to do that.
mm,
And so, my oldest is 21 now. And from the earliest moments that he could talk on a phone, he's had his own phone number or phone to be able to contact that parent.
mhm,
And that bled into our daughter when I came into my wife's life, and it just wasn't reciprocated. And so anyway, back to my daughter. She was taken out of the home. DCS never investigated anything, but um so we live an alternative lifestyle. We are within the spectrum of LGBTQ,
mm,
and that here in the rural southeastern Tennessee area is not accepted.
mm,
And this was already something our county had been threatening us about. We actually have a civil lawsuit in district court that has just been ruled on by a magistrate in a 45-page answer that is just unbelievably positive, and we're excited to continue that. But so that narrative, our police department kind of, when they heard these allegations from our daughter's father and stepmother, kind of just used that to push their own narrative of getting us out of here. Um, and so they used that and COVID had just hit when all this was taking place. So our daughter's been removed. We can't get into court to even save her because, we know our daughter. We know she was just trying to appease, but we couldn't get there to save her. And that was such a hard thing for us. Um, it really started to affect my wife. We
Mhm.
couldn't get the court, mandated even therapies or visitations. Um, and so the system was worked, and DCS really tried to put space there. They knew that's what was going to work for them. Um, they did a full forensic interview months later with my son, didn't find anything.
Mhm.
Um, this led into almost a year. And during that year, my wife's best friend was gone, suddenly ripped from the home. Um, my wife started, mentally, taking a turn, and I could see it. I wrote my therapist, or correction, I wrote my lawyer 8 different emails saying, "Look, I'm watching my wife deteriorate. I'm watching it in front of my eyes. We need to get these visitations. We need to do, the things that the court is saying to do." But again, COVID had just kind of slowed everything down, and so on April 14th, well, actually April 10th of 2021, um, our nonprofit and business were doing amazing, and we had a huge fundraiser getting ready to happen at the end of this week we're talking about, and everything got to my wife. Just everything. She had just gotten over a severe bout with COVID,
Mhm.
major surgery, and all on top of her daughter. Um,
Mm.
and so my wife broke.
Mhm.
Um, she left her home in the middle of the night without anybody knowing. She was found 2 hours away in a vacant parking lot where she was watched by officers for more than 3 hours, acting odd. They finally made contact with her where she was, quote, conscious but incoherent, sent to the hospital where our story really, really makes a turn. And um, family members were contacted that my wife cut out of her life. And, she's got a traumatic childhood experience, and boundaries. People don't understand what boundaries are these days.
Mhm.
Well, you have to put your boundaries in place, and my wife did that. And these family members came, and the hospital had already done an initial evaluation of my wife. No marks, bruises, nothing. She was in emotional distress, and so they put her on a psychiatric hold. Well, the family shows up after that was done, and the words that were said to this doctor is what changed our entire direction of our life. Just the ridiculous things that were said, things like, I've held my wife and son hostage for 2 years. Nobody's seen them. I mean, just off the wall things.
Mhm.
And so my wife ended up being handcuffed without her knowledge, being handcuffed and transported to a mental health facility. Um, my wife's phone was given to her sister, who is an identical twin,
Mhm.
and who we now know opened her phone with facial recognition
Mhm.
and got the contents of my wife's personal cell phone. So if you can imagine your worst enemy out there getting a hold of your personal cell phone, you can just think about that for a second. And so
Mhm.
that's what happened, and that's where things really took a turn for us.
I'm so sorry to hear that. It seems family sometimes uh, plays a hand in all of this.
I do see that a lot. The stories that people contact me with is a lot about families, and
Mhm.
my wife's twin sister, well before we were put into this, she knows how to use the system. She's got I believe it's three husbands with, different kids with all of them. Each one of those exes will tell you she used the system. She's very good at that. She's a master manipulator. And so it's just family. I don't get it. I
I
just
yeah,
I don't get it.
I don't either. I don't either. But, when this turn happened, then they came after you and your son.
So that's where it really gets good. So, my wife was in the ER, the initial hours of her at the original hospital. They came out and did a welfare check and let him right in, let him go see Aiden, who had been sleeping with me because mom was gone.
Mhm,
They left, everything was okay. They came back Tuesday, um, and did with DCS in tow, separated me and my son for more than an hour, did a full interview with him, no issues, brought
mm,
him back. I'm thinking, they're going to take him. All I'm saying is, can I say bye? Let me pack him a bag. No, no, we're not going to take him.
hmm,
And so I think you probably saw in our speeches that DCS left our home that day and went to the mental health lockdown facility where my wife was being held, involuntarily,
mhm,
um, for a diagnosis that says she has no reality. Like, if I'm telling you right now that I'm wearing a white shirt, but you think it's pink, there's nothing that I'm going to do. We can have the same conversation the same way. You're not going to know there's anything wrong, or anybody listening to this wouldn't think anything is wrong, but you believe that. And
mhm,
so you believe this is a pink shirt. But they went inside and they interviewed her. They took her to a back room where, she's already thinking the police and FBI are after you. That's part of this diagnosis. They put her in a back room and they interrogate her. And here they had just left our home talking with my son for over an hour. And my wife's only question is, how's my husband? How's my son? I left in the middle of the night. And they're saying, we don't know. Your husband's not coming to the door. My wife's saying, well, can you call the school and see how my son is? No, can't do that. Although all they really had to say is, look, we just met with your son. He's doing okay. But can we talk about this?
mhm,
But instead, they just kept pushing my wife further and further into psychosis.
mhm, mhm,
Um, the sheriff's department started calling my wife in this mental health facility on Tuesday. Um, and here she's supposed to be trying to get help. She hadn't even been medicated at this point yet. And here they're interrupting her mental health.
mhm.
And it doesn't, I can't wrap my brain around why a hospital would allow that either.
Right.
But DCS should know that, but it gets worse. Then they do a meeting on the phone with my wife in a mental health care facility. DCS, the sister, the mother, it just the attorney or guardian ad litem, you know, talking with my wife standing in a mental health facility. This leads to the police department coming to the mental health facility the next day. So now we've had DCS not only showing up, but
Mhm,
then calling her. Now we have the sheriff's department showing up and again taking her to a back room, sitting her down and basically giving her, an ultimatum. And so my wife ended up having to choose my son over me, which I understand. I do understand as a parent. It doesn't make it easier, but I
mhm,
understand. And so what that meant was on Wednesday, after the police department had come and interrogated her in person, they came back to our county, and about 7 o'clock that night is when SWAT teams, a
oh,
place they had just been 3 days prior, or the previous 3 days, welcomed in, sat, talked, joked, laughed, talked to my
Mhm.
kids. Now they feel they need SWAT teams. And so SWAT teams come in, they arrest me, they take my son, have him open all of our locked doors through personal key codes that we had, searched our entire home, um, confiscated items. We only have a handwritten list of items confiscated. Um, it's just unbelievable what has happened.
No, so I apparently when they left your home, they took your son away that day?
So my wife, again, in a mental health facility, was contacted by the police department, again on Wednesday. So after they interviewed her, came back to our county, brought the SWAT teams in, they had called my wife at that point and said, "You can come get your son. We're going in." My wife somehow walks up to the nurse's station and says, "I need to go get my son. The police are calling and saying I can come get him." Somehow, even through her notes, she is still actively in psychosis. They let her out.
Oh,
So she comes back to the home where police are everywhere. Again, she's in psychosis. This is feeding her psychosis.
mhm,
Cop cars, it's like a movie. And so she comes in where police are everywhere. They're putting things in front of her to sign. She's in psychosis. They put warrants in front of her. They put all this stuff. And so um, after all that's done, they then tell her, "Well, pack him a bag because we're taking him." So you used all her information while she was in the hospital to build a case, but now you're saying she's not competent to have her son. So a lot of just darkness behind the truth here, and
mhm,
um, so yes, he was taken and put with a maternal grandparent who he really doesn't even know. It's
mhm,
probably met her 10, 15 times minimum for 10 minutes apiece. Um, and he endured a lot of abuse over there, and that's one of the hardest things. In court on that Friday, we had court. So Wednesday is when the SWAT teams came in. That Friday, I begged the judge, not to put him with this grandparent that, you know, DCS had already sat down with my wife privately and talked about, her mother because she was part of this whole process. And, my wife had detailed, how much, just trauma and abuse she had suffered growing up. But here they are in court fighting for my son to go over there. And so I begged and pleaded. That didn't work. He was put over there until, um, DCS witnessed themselves some abuse going on. And I got the number wrong. We originally said it was 20 days. Their policy says 14 days to move a child. My child was over there 30 days, 30 days,
mm,
just, hearing more torment because now, the maternal grandmother knew that he had said something. And so, it was unfortunate, but he did get moved. He was moved almost 3 hours away to a different area in Tennessee, still close to 2 hours away for us. Just space. DCS again was trying to put space there. They ended up I believe it was 3 forensic interviews they did with my son. Never once came up with anything. And these are people that are trained, right?
right,
To do this. Now, not the ones in the field. We all know that they don't have the proper, forensic training to be able to question these kids.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm,
but zero was ever found. There's no proof. There's nothing showing that our child was ever abused. I mean,
mhm.
Marianne, there was 2 other adults in our home when DCS came with the SWAT teams. that he knew from every day that they could have said, here you go, you stay here until your dad gets out of jail or till your
Mhm.
mom's feeling better, to leave him in his own home.
Mhm.
It wasn't the narrative that they wanted.
That's just how sad for your son, and these 3 forensic interviews were also done at taxpayer expense, and I don't know if the taxpayer knows that they do this stuff on the taxpayer dollar.
You know, Marianne, I'm 40 something years old, and until this process happened, I'm gonna be honest, politics and all that kind of stuff wasn't something I really cared about. I just thought it was over there and it kind of did its own thing.
Mhm,
People always argue about, you get that tax bill for your property, you get this and that. This is where that money's going.
mhm,
When they bring up false allegations or
mhm.
they want to weaponize the system for whatever the issue might be, this is why your taxes are going up. And I was just ignorant to that fact. I didn't care. And now through this process, the amount of money that is being spent just in our case, much less timesing that by hundreds, that's where your money is.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very sickening. People have no idea, and like we said earlier, until it happens to you.
Yep, absolutely. It's
And so
unbelievable.
your poor son is now 3 hours away in some facility. Did you have any contact with him at all while he was in there?
So it was actually a therapeutic foster home that already had another child who was higher on the spectrum of needing help. Um, But my son, he endured even more abuse at the hands of this other child. A lot of physical abuse, pulling hair, punching. And my son had never been around that kind of stuff.
Right.
He was the baby of the family. So, through the process of my oldest son, our daughter, and now him, my parenting got better as well. And, I was very close to him and excuse me, he just that wasn't what he knew, and so that was, kind of a culture shock to him as well, being, abused like that, and so the 4 hours a month I got, or we got, 4 hours a month that we got was spent with, our son just telling us all these horror stories. And, here we're trying to say, hey, let's bowl, let's be a family, let's forget about that.
Mm.
But our son wanted to express himself and tell us these things. And so those 4 hours, pretty much were just, more trauma because we couldn't do anything. Um, so that was the time that we got to spend with him. And it had to be supervised.
Oh, yeah.
Supervised.
Yeah,
Super
because you're so dangerous.
so dangerous. It's
I'm
just
so sorry. Ugh.
but Marianne, this happens over and over and over. I'm hearing about it.
Mhm.
And, again, I keep going back to before this process, I would have sat back and been like, "You're not telling me something. There's no way that the state is doing this to do this, and you didn't do something." I'm telling you, they can and they are.
Mhm. Yeah, it's greed at its finest, at the expense of children that should never have been removed. I know some kids need to be removed because there is horrible things happening. I
Absolutely.
think I think CPS should just be abolished and something else put in there, perhaps with higher intelligent individuals with psychology and PhDs to handle some of these situations.
Yeah, no, I can't agree more. There needs to be more checks and balances as
Mhm.
well, with real life people instead of, politicians and lawyers and, get facts, at least put, civilian people, the lay person on that board, that committee that you guys are handling this because, you know, all these things are being made up here at this level without any input from down here in the real world, and that's got to stop. That has
Mhm.
got to stop.
When you spoke before the General Assembly, how nervous were you both before you got up on there on the podium?
So what had originally happened was we went in the week prior to that, and this bill was supposed to be heard, and we went in extremely early. The room was empty, and so I had my son sit at the table and read his speech just with nobody in the room. He was nervous, and um
Mm.
we sat through this entire hearing, and they pushed the bill. They pushed it off. They weren't even going to hear it. And so um we had to come back the next week, and he wasn't expecting to speak, because they originally had told us on the phone that because we're all from the same family, only one person gets 2 minutes because it's just
Oh.
just trying to limit, people speaking, and
Mm.
I really hate to start sounding like somebody that's all about government, corruption, but I'm telling you, I'm watching it. I was a part of it, and I'm watching it happen, and, when they try to limit people from talking, people that have been through this much less,
Mhm.
what is going on? So, I was the only one that was gonna speak that day, and the speaker that was handling that kind of session that you see talking wasn't the actual chair. And so I don't know if they had that information, but they had called all of us up, and so in some of the prior videos of that, you can see us kind of like talking about, well, hey, they told us only one person. So anyway, he was caught off guard, and he
Mm.
actually grabbed his original 5-minute speech instead of the
Aw.
2-minute speech because he was just so flustered. And
Aw.
so, he did a amazing
Yes, he did.
job, and, I'm so daggone proud of him, and they did listen. It didn't seem like it went too far, but, yeah, and so he got more out as well instead of just his 2-minute speech.
Mhm. And they had said, they tried to say to him, "Your 2 minutes is up," and you had said, "Wait a minute, it's only one more sentence."
Yeah, I wasn't gonna let him get up there and get through that whole speech, even though it was his longer speech, get up there and be muted. I
Mhm.
wasn't gonna let that happen, and so that's why I said, "Look, he's got one more sentence," and it was one of the most powerful things that he had left, and I'm glad that, they allowed that to finish.
Well, at least it's on the record.
It is.
Um,
It is, and that's huge for parents to understand, especially when you're in court. Uh, get it on the record. Say
mhm,
it out loud no matter what it is, because it should be on a court recording. It should go into the record. It doesn't matter, you know, get it on the record. If you think it's important, get it on the record.
mhm. I know, because when I was going through this, I would tap my attorney on the shoulder and say, "Put me back on the witness stand." "Oh, wait a minute. Put me back on the witness stand," just to go and get things on the record.
Yeah, and that leads into a whole another thorn bush, when you talk about, family attorneys.
Mhm,
Um, again, I think there's a place for them as well, but, a lot of this, they want their money up front, and, they already know what they're gonna do. I mean, a
mhm,
lot of this is already predetermined, behind doors before you've even made your entire,
Yes.
deposit, because they've reached out to the other attorneys or the state. They've already got information of what's going on. And, I mean, just even with, kind of the early on trials, a lot of us waive our rights to preliminaries.
Mhm.
No, no, don't let your attorney do that. And that's one thing Connie regularly did for us.
Mhm.
Make them put their proof on. Because guess what? You go and you do it again, but don't be blindsided. Make your attorney absolutely do a preliminary hearing. Period. You're paying for it. Make them do it.
Mhm. Yeah, so important stuff parents don't know. I I didn't know that either until you just said it.
Absolutely. And that's something that um now look, we've been through attorneys, and that's one of the things the other side,
Mhm.
thinks is funny. But when you're talking about your child, money's, if you have the money to be able to find the right attorney, it, money's not anything. And so
Mhm.
we've been through probably 7 or 8 attorneys, but they all did the same thing. It was just, mediocre. They
Right.
didn't want to do their job. If it was their child, and I tell my current attorney this all the time. If this was your child, put yourself in our place. Like, what happened. Here's the proof. It's not my words. Here's black and white. And my attorney has told me, specifically, my hands are pretty tied here. I mean, I've got to, I had one attorney tell me I have to work with these people every day. I got to work with these people. Um, and that kind of goes to part of our case that we really didn't even talk about yet is, after April 14th, SWAT teams come in, take our child. My wife at that point was dropped. They didn't need her anymore. So she bounced around from couch to couch, hotel to hotel while she's in active psychosis. And finally, I have a order of protection. I can't even talk to her. And um I knew something was going on. I told him in court, that's my wife, but that's not my wife. I
Mhm.
could hear it in her voice. And so I got reconnected with my wife, and she was just in terrible sorts.
Mm.
And so I took her to the number one hospital in the country, John Hopkins, number one mental health hospital.
Mhm.
Same exact diagnosis. And, so I bring her home, and her dad passes away.
Mm.
Just if the trauma already wasn't worse enough.
Mhm.
But the order of protection was dropped so that this terrible, dangerous guy could take my wife to her father's funeral.
Mhm.
And what we didn't know was they put the bond restrictions back in place. And so even with my wife sending all of her medical records to the district attorney and all this, stuff showing that she was incompetent, they wouldn't drop the domestic charges against me. And so I had to go to court where my attorney had been telling me there's not going to be any issue here. She's saying nothing happened. Here's the medical evidence to prove it.
Mhm.
They forced me to plead. My attorney forced me. I mean, after hours of me saying I won't do it.
Mhm.
This could be the same day that my wife was out front. Our town is really, really small, kind of like one of those one stoplight towns. And
Mhm.
my wife had gone to the town separately, and I had gone in a different vehicle with my son. They saw my wife driving by, and so detectives and police run out of the courthouse past me, and I'm on the phone with my wife, and I said, "Jess, I don't know what's going on, but I think they're coming after you."
Mm.
And sure enough, they block her in, they remove her from her car, They force her in the back of their police car. The whole time she's asking, "Am I under arrest? Can I call my attorney? No, no, no. I'll just drive to the courthouse." "No, you're getting in the back. You either get in the back or we're going to put you in handcuffs." Well, the first thing they did was take her phone, obviously, because they don't want anything recorded, right? They're
Right.
smart.
Yep.
But what they didn't understand is, like I told you before, I used to work within this system. And so my wife had a backup recorder and caught this entire interaction on tape where she was forced again into the back of this police car, taken to the courthouse where I'm out front. She's brought into the back. She's put into a room where like 8 or 9 guys in suits come in are trying to get her to plead or to make me plead or to come up with something against me. And we all ask why, because at the time I couldn't understand why I was being forced to plead to something that I didn't do.
Mhm.
But we now know DCS had nothing. So unless they had gotten me to plead to a violent crime, they had no reason to have my child. But again, this whole interaction is on tape because obviously I was taping as well.
Mhm.
Which is something else I think everybody should do. Gosh, I don't care what your state laws
Mhm.
are. I don't care. You shouldn't be worried about what you're gonna say, period. And, so I was forced to plead. I was given the option to go to jail or to plead and go home with my wife. And so my option or my choice was I wanted to go to jail. I wanted people to ask the question of why I was in jail.
Mhm.
And my attorney tells me at that point, "I think you're too incompetent to make that choice." This is on tape. My attorney tells me at that point, suddenly, he doesn't think I'm competent to make that choice. We now know he knows the DA. Again, he works with him. He's the one that told me that um, he has to work with this guy every day. And so I just became a pawn and, within the system. And he was doing them a solid by making me plead so that DCS could cover their tracks and have a reason to have our son. And so that's the basis of, kind of our civil lawsuit against the police department. That, I referred to it earlier where the police, we were talking about perjury.
Mhm.
That police investigator was called to family court and just said some of the most you know, outlandish things that
Mhm.
never had happened. And, Connie had asked her about, when she took my wife, and she said, "No, no, she came willingly. No issues. She just when she knew that, we wanted her up there, she just came willingly." Me and my wife were looking at each other like, "Wow, they really just did that." So we came home and got Connie the tape. We had it transcribed. Connie on the next, this is, her testimony was one of the reasons our son didn't come home at that time. And so Connie entered that into, evidence, having, wanting to have that testimony stricken. Court judge, nope, wasn't going to, um, wasn't going to hurt that officer's career because of this one mistake, I guess it was. I
Hmm.
mean, it's black and white on tape, not my words again. And, even then, we don't hold these officers accountable.
Right, there's no accountability in this system.
Nope, nope. And like we also had the DCS worker caught in the middle of showing they perjured themselves.
Mhm.
Didn't matter, didn't matter.
Mm-mm. So, your son's doing okay? He's, happy at school and has friends and
So, my son didn't wanna go back to our small town school.
Mhm.
Because the rumors are
Mm.
rampant.
Uh-huh.
And so, he's homeschooled now, but, he's doing really well. He's always all of our kids, we're pretty good students. And, so he's home, but he's doing a lot of extracurricular. I think I told you earlier, he's already flying aircraft. He's
Mhm.
looking to, hopefully be a pilot one day. So really doing some cool things.
That's great. I think that's great. Good for him. And I also liked in his speech how he ended, what he was saying with, "That was not in the best interest of the children."
Here we are,
Multiple.
yeah, 2023, and we're just now putting that language in the bill. Um, you know, it's just, it's sad. Here in Tennessee, we have a new person, heading, DCS. The last person in was let go or fired. It's also notable that, both of the caseworkers that were on our case, one is gone and the other one was taken out of the field. May be gone by now, but like I said, we're still within our case. Um, it's those are just signs, and I really do hope that this new, head of DCS here in our state does better. I really do, because
Mhm,
it always should be the best interest of the child and family, period.
mhm. And not the destruction of the family unit.
Money, that's what
I
it boils down to,
Yes.
money, and is just off as that sounds, and it's not. It really comes down to money. Where do they make their money to sustain themselves, to get their bonuses, to be able to get, the things that they need to do this job? But it comes down to money and integrity, period.
Yeah, these bonuses and incentives, they just keep rolling in.
And I'm not sure if you got to really see my speech or not, but I do believe, DCS is overworked. I mean, they were in one of the different bills we sat
Oh,
there and
yes.
listened to. You know, they're talking about 20 cases to one person. That that means children are not getting what they need. I
Mhm,
mean, caseworkers, to me, after seeing what my caseworker had to do and what she should have done, there shouldn't be more than 4 or 5 cases to a caseworker, tops, and we're talking about 20? No. I mean, that's affecting, your visitations, your phone
mhm.
calls, when you can get to court, when that child can go to extracurriculars. Like, there's so many things, because now you're talking about 20 different kids. Mm,
And then it's bad enough when there's a death in foster care.
yeah. So our my son's grandfather, who he was pretty close to, passed away, and trying to get that trying to get that situated just wasn't in the benefit of my child, and became a traumatic event. So, um, yeah, and sorry, I've just got so many things, and I'm going back to all these stories that parents have told me about their child passing away while in DCS, and sorry, it's just all going through my head right now.
Oh, I understand, I understand. I'm
There's
so
a
sorry.
major
Yes.
problem, and, we're lucky to have Connie in our state,
Oh,
and
yes.
the the just the fundamental stopping her is their only goal, because she's the squeaky wheel,
Mhm,
and again, if I hadn't seen that process, I would have said there's no way that happened.
mhm,
I watched it and heard it. But she has the Family Forward project, and if parents that are listening don't know about that, that is the first thing that needs to happen when you unclick this podcast. Find your local Family Forward, or find the Family Forward Facebook page, click it, reach out, because that's all parents that are really doing the same thing and have been through the same thing as you have. You know, a lot of us were silenced, including myself. I was so daggone embarrassed. I didn't want to put my story out there. But, you know, our whole life was opened up. Our whole entire life was put out there for everybody to see. So I've got nothing to hide. I've
Mhm.
got nothing to hide. Just like when I told that DCS worker the first time, as you did,
Mm.
come in, look around, see
Yeah.
what you want to see. I don't care. That's where I'm at now. And that's what parents have to understand is get connected. TikTok, all these places are allowing parents now to really connect,
Mhm.
and that's where our fight is growing, is parents reaching out to each other.
Exactly. And I'm so glad to have you speak out and very proud of your son. Very proud of him.
Yeah, I really hope he goes on, to continue advocating because, you know, a lot of our children just wanna put it behind them,
Mm.
and, you know, so does my son, but, you know, his story is powerful, and I hope he uses that to help more kids moving forward through his adult life, and I
Mhm.
really do think he will.
Well, excellent. I'd like to have you back on again. Um, that would be
Anytime.
great. It'd be great. Well, how can people reach you if they have any questions?
Sure, so my email is, Freedom Hills Campground, all one word, Freedom Hills with an S, campground at gmail.com. Um, I'm disabled vet, so I'm at home. You know, I'm here working my case most days, 14 hours. I sit here in front of this computer and you know, it's reaching out and just making those connections with people. That's how our voices are going to be heard.
Definitely. And thanks for taking the time out to speak on my podcast. I am really honored that you came on.
Marianne, I wish that more people were able to do this because I think it's voices that are so important for people
Mhm.
to hear because that's the only way the change is going to happen. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you. Well, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Chad Farley in the future, all the way from Tennessee, and other exciting guests. Thank you so much.